Before beginning the story, I'd like to say a big thank you for visiting my new channel. I'm going to be uploading alternate history-related stories every single day. If that sounds good, be sure to leave a like and don't forget to subscribe. It means a whole lot when just getting started. I hope you enjoy the story. The wedding got called off at 9 in the morning. Not postponed, not quietly rescheduled, called off, with a phone call between the two people getting married that apparently went badly enough that by 10 o'clock the venue was notified, and by 11 the guests were getting texts, and by noon I was sitting in a hotel bar in Dunrath with a gin and tonic I hadn't needed yet, but was going to. I didn't know the groom well enough to be useful, and I didn't know the bride at all, so there was nothing for me to do except exist somewhere out of the way while other people dealt with it. I was there for the sound setup. The groom's family had hired me to run audio for the reception, a last-minute thing through a mutual contact, and I'd driven 4 hours and checked into a hotel room I now had for 2 more nights with nowhere to be and nothing to do, and a city I didn't know at all. I drank through the afternoon, not hard, just steadily. The bartender was a talker, and that helped. By evening, I'd eaten something and felt functional and decided to walk, because Dunrath was supposed to have a decent waterfront, and I'd seen nothing of it except the drive from the highway. I don't remember the part where the walk went wrong. I remember the waterfront, the lights on the water, a street that curved away from the main drag into something quieter. I remember checking my phone for the time. And then I was sitting on a bench at a bus stop on a street I didn't recognize, and my phone said it was just past midnight, and the gin had worn off enough that I was cold and sober and confused about how I'd gotten there. The street was not the waterfront. It was not anything I remembered walking through. It was a standard city block, buildings on both sides, street lights working, no traffic. Quiet without being unsettling at first. The kind of quiet that a street has at midnight when nothing's wrong. The bus stop was ordinary. Bench, shelter roof overhead. A schedule board mounted to the post. I sat on the bench because I was tired and I needed a minute. And after a minute, I looked at the schedule board to get my bearings, to figure out what route this was and whether it went anywhere useful. The board didn't list routes. It listed years, not destinations with years attached, not a timetable with dates on it, just years, one after another, in 2 columns. Some were behind us, decades back. Some were forward in a way I didn't look at for long, because looking at them made something in my chest do something unpleasant. The formatting was exactly like a transit schedule. The spacing, the font, the little markers indicating frequency, all of it perfectly normal except for the thing it was saying. I looked away. I looked back. It still said what it said. I stood up and looked down the street in both directions. Nothing coming. I pulled out my phone to call a cab and had no signal, which was new. I'd had signal all evening. I walked to the edge of the shelter and held the phone up and moved it around and got nothing. I sat back down. 15 minutes later, give or take, headlights came around the far corner and a bus pulled up to the stop. It was wrong before it even stopped fully. The shape of it was off, not the shape of a current model, not anything running on a modern transit line. It was older, the kind of profile you'd see in old footage, wide and rounded in a way that buses stopped being 30-some years ago. The livery on the side was a color scheme and logo I didn't recognize, but that felt like something from before I was paying attention to that kind of thing. The door opened with a sound that was exactly right. That pneumatic exhale, perfectly normal. The driver was behind the wheel in a grey uniform, heavy-set, a cap pulled low enough that the shadow from the brim covered most of their face. I could see the jaw, the neck. Not enough to give me much. They looked at me from under the cap and didn't say anything. They just had the door open and they waited. I looked past them into the bus. There were passengers, 8 or 10 people in the seats, all facing forward, nobody looking at the stop. Their clothes were wrong, the same way the bus was wrong. The cut of the jackets, the styles, something that placed them at a remove from right now. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. The interior lights were on and warm, and the whole thing looked like an ordinary late-night bus full of people tired from wherever they'd been. I didn't get on. I don't know exactly why. I wasn't thinking clearly enough to have a reason. I just stood there, and the door stayed open, and the driver stayed still, and after maybe 30 seconds, the door closed and the bus pulled away. I watched it go down the street. I watched it for longer than made sense because I was waiting to see it turn a corner or go far enough to get small. It didn't do either. It was there, and then it wasn't. Between 1 second and the next, like a channel changing. A voice from the far end of the bench said, "You made the right call." She'd been sitting there the whole time. I don't know how I'd missed her. She was right there, at the end of the bench, in a dark coat, with her arms crossed and her legs stretched out in front of her. She was maybe mid-30s, dark-haired, with the kind of face that had probably been open and easy before whatever she'd been through at this bus stop had worked on it for a while. Her name was Sable. She gave it to me like it was just information, no preamble, because we were past the part where pleasantries made sense. She told me what I'd already half understood and hadn't wanted to finish understanding. The buses were real. The years on the schedule were real. The driver, she called him the conductor, said it the way you name something because you need to call it something, was the same on every bus regardless of where the bus came from. She'd been at the stop for what she thought was around 2 days. Her phone didn't work either. The street didn't go anywhere helpful. She'd figured most of this out the hard way. I asked her what happened if you got on. She said she didn't know for certain. She said she thought you went, and that going was probably permanent in the direction of not coming back to where you started. She said it like someone who'd had a lot of time to sit with a theory and had stopped hoping it was wrong. I asked her why the buses matched the schedule board. She said she thought the schedule was different for everyone, that it pulled from you somehow. Years that meant something to you specifically. Years you recognized when the bus showed up, even if you couldn't have told anyone why before it arrived. I asked how it knew. She said she didn't think that was the right question to be spending energy on. She was right about the targeting. I understood that inside the next hour. A bus came that I put at the late 90s from the model and the coloring, and something in me knew the year before I even looked at the board, knew it the way you know the name of a song from the first 2 notes. I was 17 that year. It was the year of a specific thing I hadn't thought about in a long time, a thing I'd put somewhere out of reach and left there. The door opened. The conductor waited under the brim of the cap, I stayed on the bench. Another one came, and it was older, early model, a year I placed because of my father. He'd been alive that year. It was before the diagnosis, before all of it. Back when he was just a person I took for granted, the way you take people for granted when you assume they'll always be there. The door opened, and the bus just sat there with its lights on, and I looked at the floor of the shelter and counted to 10 and looked up, and the door was closing. Sable watched me through all of it without saying anything. She didn't have to say anything. She'd been doing this for 2 days. She knew what the buses felt like. After the third one, a year, I turned down a job offer that would have relocated me somewhere I actually wanted to be. Turned it down because I was scared of the version of myself that might show up if I let things change. I sat down hard on the bench and put my hands over my face for a minute. I said, this thing knows what it's doing. Sable said, yeah, it really does. I noticed she tensed up before certain buses arrived. Not all of them. Some she watched with nothing. Just the flat attention of someone cataloging information. But every so often, her arms would tighten across her chest and her jaw would set, and I could see her working at something the way you work at a door that's stuck. The 4th or 5th time this happened, I asked her. She didn't answer right away. The bus came, and this one I could see from her face was the one, the specific one. The bus she'd been fighting for 2 days, and the door opened and she stood up from the bench, and I thought she was going to board it. But she stood there with her hands balled at her sides until the door closed and the bus pulled away. And then she sat back down, and she looked like she'd just finished something that had taken everything she had. I asked her again, quieter. She said it was the year her daughter was born. She said her daughter's name was Petra, and that Petra had been 3 years old when an illness came through their house fast and hard and didn't leave the way it came. She said it plainly. The way you say something, you've said enough times that the words have gone smooth from handling, but the thing underneath them hasn't. She said the bus had been coming back every few hours since she'd been at the stop. I said I was sorry. It felt inadequate. It was. She said she knew what was on that bus. She knew the year and what the year meant, and she knew that whatever the bus was offering her was not real, was not actually Petra, was not anything that would give her what she thought it was giving her. She knew all of that. She said knowing didn't make the door any easier to watch close. We sat with that for a while. I tried leaving twice. The first time I walked a full block before the street began to do the things Sable had warned me about. Not anything dramatic, no sudden changes, just a quiet rearrangement of geography that was somehow more unsettling for how undramatic it was. I took a left, walked another half block, took a right, and was back at the shelter from a direction that made no sense given where I'd just been. The street had folded me back like a letter. The second time, I went the opposite direction and further, and the same thing happened, just slower, like it was giving me the dignity of trying before returning me. I came back to the bench. Sable had one arm propped on her knee and her chin in her hand, and she looked at me with something that wasn't quite sympathy, but was close to it. The way you look at someone repeating a test you've already failed. She said she'd gotten 4 blocks once. I said, what do we do? She said you wait and you don't get on, and eventually she thought it had to let you go. She didn't say it with confidence. She said it the way you say something, because the alternative, that it doesn't, that it holds you there until you board, was not a thing she was willing to settle into yet. So we waited. The next time Sable's bus came, it didn't leave right away. It pulled up, and the door opened, and the conductor sat in the grey uniform with the cap down and the shadow where a face should be, and the bus just sat there, idling, the exhaust in the cold air, the interior lights warm and steady. Sable stood up. I said her name. She said she knew. I said she'd told me she knew this wasn't real, that whatever was on that bus wasn't going to give her what it looked like it was offering. I said it not accusingly. I want to be clear about that. I said it because I didn't know what else to say, and because I meant it as a reason rather than a judgment. She said I was right. She said the whole thing was clear to her, had been clear, and that clarity didn't weigh as much as she'd thought it would. She said it calmly, like someone explaining a math problem they'd worked out ahead of time. I reached out and put my hand on her arm. She looked at my hand and then at me, and she said, and I've thought about this exact sentence every day since. I don't think I'll ever stop. She said that I didn't have anything on my list that hurt that much yet, and that when I did, I'd understand. She got on the bus. The door closed. I stood at the shelter and watched the bus as it started to pull away, and I looked through the rear window, and she was in a seat near the back, and her face. I want to describe her face correctly because it's the part that stays with me most. She didn't look tricked. She didn't look like someone making a terrible mistake in the way that mistakes feel terrible when you're inside them. She looked like someone who had been holding something very heavy for a very long time and had just set it down. Whether what she'd set it down for was worth it, whether she got what she thought she was getting, I don't know. I'll never know. But that's what her face looked like in the 5 seconds I could see it before the bus did what the other buses did. Then it was gone. I stood there alone at the stop. Then headlights came around the corner. I knew the year before it stopped. I knew it from the bus's age, and I knew it from something lower than thought. Something in the body that registers certain years the way it registers a scar. Not pain exactly, just the reminder of where the pain was. It was the year my father died. The door opened, the conductor under the cap, the shadow where the face went, the warm interior of the bus, a handful of passengers looking forward, going somewhere. I stood up from the bench. I walked to the open door. I stood in front of it for long enough that I couldn't tell you how long it was. Long enough that my eyes adjusted to the interior light and I could see the seats clearly, the overhead luggage racks, the dark windows showing nothing outside. Long enough that I thought about my father's voice, which I haven't been able to fully reconstruct in my head for a few years now, the way voices go first. Long enough that I thought about the last real conversation we'd had, which had been ordinary, unremarkable, neither of us knowing it was the last one. I stepped back. I said no at the open door, at the conductor, at the whole patient apparatus of it. Just no. Once. Out loud on a street in a city where no one heard it. The door closed. The bus pulled away. And the street was different. Not dramatically. The geometry of it just worked correctly again. The way a shoulder works after something's been put back into place. I looked one direction and saw a cross street I recognized from earlier in the night. I looked the other way and saw the waterfront lights in the distance. I picked up my jacket from the bench and I walked. I got back to the hotel at close to 3 in the morning. The night clerk looked at me the way night clerks look at guests coming in late from bad nights, professionally incurious, and I rode the elevator to my floor and went into my room and sat on the edge of the bed. I thought about Sable for a long time. I thought about what she'd said, that I didn't have anything on my list that hurt that much yet. The word yet had been in there. She'd put it in deliberately, I thought. She wasn't wrong. My father had been gone for 7 years, and it still opened something up inside me when a bus from the year he died pulled to the curb and waited. And that was only my father. I was 29 years old. I had a lot of years left to put things on a list. I didn't know if what she'd found on that bus was real. I didn't know if Petra was there, if there was a version of that year where things went differently. I didn't know what the stop was, or what the conductor was, or what the whole machinery of it was built to accomplish. I knew that it was patient. I knew that it was specific. I knew that it understood regret better than anything had a right to. I booked a 6:30 flight home before I went to sleep. The airport was ordinary in the morning, bright and loud and full of people going places, the specific anonymous energy of early flights, everyone tired and pointed in different directions. I got through security without trouble and found my gate and sat down with a bad coffee and stared at my phone. I looked up at the departures board once, automatically, the way you check those boards without thinking about it. The board was running normally, cities and times and gate numbers, everything where it was supposed to be. I was looking at it in the general way you look at something without reading it carefully, when one of the entries flickered, just the once, just for a second. The city on the line disappeared, and a year took its place. Just a year, in the same font, in the same column, as if it were a destination the same as any other. The year my father died. And then the flicker was done, and the city came back, and the board was just a board. Arrivals and departures, the ordinary traffic of people going home. I looked down at my coffee. I didn't look at the board again after that. They called my road 20 minutes later, and I got in line with everyone else and handed over my boarding pass and walked down the jetway and found my seat and put my bag in the overhead and sat down. The plane pushed back from the gate on time. The city dropped away underneath us. I put my headphones in but didn't play anything, just wore them for the quiet. Outside the window, the clouds came up and covered the ground, and after that, there was nothing to see but the inside of the weather, which was the same in every direction. I thought about Sable one more time. Then I thought about getting home.